Now, the World Economic Forum is out with its Global Competitiveness Report for this year, and India, which has been ranked 40th, remains the most competitive nation in South Asia. India did slip one rank compared to last year's edition, but it still remains its highest score in World Economic Forum's current methodology. Now, the national competitiveness is defined as a set of institutions, policies, and factors that determine a country's level of productivity. Now, the other Asian superpower, China, has also inched up one place to 27th. Let's also tell you how other countries fared on the index. So Switzerland managed to hold on to its #1 position for the 9th time in a row. The United States, which was third on the competitiveness index last year, has managed to edge past Singapore to claim the 2nd spot. And Hong Kong has jumped 3 places to #6, leapfrogging Japan in the 9th spot. Now, the wooden spoon for being the least competitive economies went to Yemen, Chad, and Mozambique. Now, the index ranked Pakistan at the 115th position in the list of 137 nations in the world. Now, it's not just the index. The World Economic Forum has also highlighted that even a decade after the global financial crisis, the prospects for a sustained economic recovery remain at risk. And this is due to widespread failure on the part of leaders and policymakers to put in place reforms necessary to underpin competitiveness and bring about much needed increases in productivity. In fact, to take that conversation forward now, I'm joined by Margareta Drzeniek-Hanouz. She's the head of Economic Growth and Social Inclusion System Initiative at the World Economic Forum. Margareta, thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening. Now, an India-specific question to start with. India seems to have slipped one ranking, but your report attributes that more to methodology than actually letting go of competitiveness. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's attributed to the methodology in that sense that other countries are moving ahead of India, or one other country is moving ahead of India in that case, because India is improving in terms of the score. So it is overall, in absolute terms, an improvement in India. However, we see that with respect to the rankings, as the countries move around, India just slips one place. So, overall, I think it's a stable and leveling off that we see in India after it has improved for 2 years in a row in the past 2 editions.
Right. Also, Margareta, what would you see as the biggest risk to competitiveness specific to India? Now, as we've seen in the case of China, just last week, they got their sovereign credit rating downgraded by S&P ratings due to the high debt level. Now, in India, we're seeing a spike in bad loans. That is something that the government is trying to combat. Do you see any risk? Do you see that as a source of vulnerability for India?
Mm-hmm. Well, we still see, vulnerabilities with respect to the financial sector, stability of the financial sector in India, and actually the financial sector has been fairly stable in comparison to other economies of similar size and similar level of development in the past years. But we still see some vulnerabilities in India, as in other countries in the world. Actually, one of the key messages of this year's report is that we see continued vulnerabilities in the financial sector, and that we didn't see major improvements in terms of improving the stability of the financial sector and the soundness of the banking system globally. So this also applies to India.
Right. Now, shifting focus to one of the other key points that seems to be highlighted in the report. Now, while India seems to have done well on most parameters, it has moved at least a point or two higher. In terms of technological readiness, the country still stands at 107th in the World Economic Forum ranking. Mm-hmm. How do you think that can be changed or can be improved going forward?
I think there are two aspects to how we look at technological readiness. One aspect is that it is, the adoption of technologies from abroad, be it related to production systems. So through licensing, through foreign direct investment in technology-intensive industries. A lot of this has happened in India, but I think it needs to be, continued, and the effort needs to be stepped up in that respect. And the other, which may be even more important going forward, because it's just such an important area, is the spread of the digital technologies. And the digital technologies, they're prevalent in India, but they are not sufficiently spread across the population and across the business sector throughout the country. So, in terms of the spread of ICTs, broadband connectivity, internet use, for example, India still falls behind on many of the other economies, and efforts need to be stepped up here, because this is an area that's very important for the future. It is this area, it is on those platforms, on the digital platforms, that we will build the fourth industrial revolution that we've been talking about a lot in recent years at the World Economic Forum. And it will be important for India not to fall behind in terms of those new technologies, to really spread those digital technologies across the population and across the entire business sector.
Absolutely. Now, talking of opportunities, are there any particular sectors in India that you're looking at where you believe that there's a bigger opportunity ahead? Or sectors that you think will outperform?
We're actually not looking at it from a sectoral perspective. We're looking... Sorry? I did not understand the latest.
Talking about
so
sectors...
we don't look at any particular sectors, but we really look at areas of...
Yes, please carry on.
Yes. So we do not look at specific sectors of the economy. We look at those cross-cutting factors that drive productivity across the different sectors of the economy. So, we don't have a sectoral perspective on India. In terms of the factors that drive the productivity of India going forward, one aspect that stands out is India's performance in terms of health and primary education, where India is 91st, and also in terms of education and training, higher education and training, where India is 75th. And similar applies to the labor markets as well, that remain fairly rigid. So this entire area of labor markets, human capital, education and health really needs to improvement in India in order to strengthen the competitive position going forward.
Right, absolutely. So healthcare and education is where a lot of work is still needed. Thank you, Margareta, for taking out the time to be with us on the show this evening.